Tonight, lifting restrictions. Ukraine allowed to strike inside Russia with long-range missiles supplied by the U.S. A shift in policy, what this could mean for a larger conflict. As Russia launches a massive attack at Ukraine's energy grid.
I think my hands, my legs were trembling for 5 hours after that.
Trudeau tries to rally support at the G20 with Canada's defense spending under renewed scrutiny.
We are a laggard. We are irrelevant. We've got to do major work on our defense capabilities.
Rules of the road, cities pedal into bike lane controversy.
2024 Grey Cup is underway.
Plus, Grey Cup kickoff. Football fans celebrate the CFL championship in Vancouver. And some quintessentially Canadian prank calls.
Hello?
Hey, you. The radio host sharing cute connections with East Coasters.
Love ya. Okay, love you too. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye now.
CTV National News with Heather Butts.
Good evening. Nearly 3 years into the grueling Russia-Ukraine war, there are signs it may intensify with a major shift in U.S. policy. President Joe Biden will now let Ukraine use American-supplied missiles to hit inside Russia. The news came hours after Russia launched one of its largest attacks in months, targeting Ukraine's energy infrastructure and killing civilians, escalating fears over Moscow's intention to damage the energy grid ahead of winter. Until now, Biden had resisted this position. The change comes with only a few months left in office. CTV's Garrett Berry reports.
These are MGM-140 Army tactical missile systems, powerful supersonic missiles that Ukrainian forces have used against Russian bases inside Ukraine's old borders, but never inside Russian land. That could change. Today, outgoing U.S. President Joe Biden's administration signaled a massive shift. It has now given Ukrainian forces the green light to fire American weapons into Russia. Ukraine is said to be preparing an attack in the coming days. Tonight, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky told his citizens their actions won't be announced, but missiles speak for themselves. The American decision comes after months of petitioning by Ukrainian politicians.
We can't only be fighting on the Ukrainian territory with just trying to defend ourselves from the attacks. No country can win just by defense.
It's a bid to give Ukraine more power and more leverage in negotiations that are expected to enter a new phase when Donald Trump returns to the White House in January. But warnings, too, from United Nations General Secretary Antonio Guterres, who said today must not mark a permanent escalation in the war.
Peace in Ukraine by following the UN Charter.
All the while, it's been a day of attacks inside Ukraine from Russia. Russia launched more than 100 missiles and 90 drones. Today, blackouts across the country, residents huddled into warming stations and water lineups. In Sumy, Ukrainian prosecutors said 7 adults and 1 child were killed when a Russian missile hit a residential building. 10 more people were injured. Ukrainian officials say the attacks caused further damage to power grid infrastructure already weakened and weathered by war. No end in sight for a war that's nearing its 3rd anniversary. Garrett Berry, CTV News.
The green light to use long-range missiles will bolster Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's plan for victory over Russia. It's a plan Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is expected to champion at the G20 summit in Brazil. CTV's Judy Trin is traveling with the Prime Minister. Judy, how much support is there for Ukraine's plan?
Heather, there is support here amongst the strongest democracies, the group of 7 that make up the G20. But there is concern that commitment is waning amongst other countries as the war drags on and the new administration of Donald Trump is ushered in. With his daughter at his side, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau arrived in Rio de Janeiro, prepared to take on a pivotal role in rallying other G20 nations to continue their support of Ukraine's war on Russia. He will lobby military allies who are at this summit to extend Ukraine full membership in NATO and to support President Vladimir Zelensky's plan to win the war, which includes a return of the territory Russia has taken over after it invaded Russia nearly 3 years ago.
The fact that Russia has chosen to redraw those lines on the map is the thing that worries people the most around the world. And that's why it is so important that Ukraine wins this conflict, that Russia loses this conflict.
Host country Brazil, backed by China, is expected to float a different ceasefire plan, lobbying for G20 members to push Kyiv and Moscow into peace negotiations that will result in Russia keeping territory it has annexed. And of course, looming over all of this is uncertainty over what Donald Trump will do after his January inauguration. Trump has previously said that he would withdraw military support from Ukraine to force it to negotiate with Russia. Heather.
Judy Chen reporting from Brazil. The incoming Trump administration is also putting Canada's defense spending back in the spotlight. Trump has previously threatened to pull protection from NATO allies who don't hit the mark. CTV's Colton Prale reports.
Understaffed, under-equipped, and underprepared. The criticisms of Canada's military are long-standing, but there are new warnings about their consequences.
We are laggard. We are irrelevant. If we expect to get any attention in Washington at all on anything, we've got to do major work on our defense capabilities.
Canada is one of the only NATO members without a costed plan to hit NATO's 2% of GDP spending targets. What was a nuisance for previous American administrations could be much more consequential under a Trump White House that looks to tie defense budgets to tariffs and free trade agreements.
This will be America's new golden age.
His approach is entirely transactional, and he's perfectly happy to link what we need to what he demands.
This month, the former top soldier told a parliamentary committee Canada's military readiness was at its lowest point in 50 years, warning Canada is falling behind its NATO peers, spending just above 1.3% of GDP on defense this year, climbing to 1.76% in 2030.
Our friends and allies are tired of waiting for us. And we're now putting our nation at risk, not only in terms of defense, but also trade and credibility at a time when these predators are on the prowl.
According to the parliamentary budget officer, meeting the NATO target would mean doubling military spending over the next 8 years.
Experts say unless Canada acts quickly, the country risks becoming increasingly marginalized as hard power and military might become greater factors in international relations. Heather.
Colton, thank you. In the Middle East, Hezbollah says its media relations chief is dead after an Israeli strike on central Beirut. 3 others were injured in the attack. Mohammed Afif was a longtime media advisor to Hezbollah's late leader, and a separate strike Sunday, also in central Beirut, killed 2 and injured 22 others. To Southeast Asia now, where Typhoon Mange swept across the Philippines. The storm brought heavy rains and strong winds, triggering more than 1 million evacuations and damaging several buildings. Mange is the 6th tropical cyclone to hit the islands in a month. Canada's immigration programs were the subject of a YouTube video released today by the Prime Minister, arguing that the federal government could have acted faster to make corrections.
Looking back, when the post-pandemic boom cooled and businesses no longer needed the additional labor help, as a federal team, we could have acted quicker and turned off the taps faster.
Trudeau said increased immigration was needed after the pandemic to boost the labor market, but the Prime Minister says, quote, bad actors took advantage of the programs, including employers trying to avoid hiring Canadians and schools recruiting international students. The government has already announced it is reducing permanent resident streams by about 20% in 2027. A long-awaited trial is set to get underway this week into two men accused of smuggling a family across the U.S.-Canada border in freezing temperatures. The parents and their two children died making the harrowing journey. The court decision could have an impact on immigration laws. CTV's Kamal Karmali reports.
It's been almost 3 years since a family from India was found frozen to death here near the border between Manitoba and Minnesota. Now Harsh Kumar Patel and Steve Shand will stand trial this week on human smuggling charges. Prosecutors allege as part of their operation, Patel would drop migrants near the border in Manitoba. They would walk across and Shand would pick them up on the U.S. side. But in mid-January of 2022, blizzard conditions and wind chill below minus 35 Celsius left Jagdish Patel, his wife Veshalabin, and their two children dead. Autopsies confirmed they died from hypothermia a few meters from the border.
Our law enforcement has to slam down hard to try and prevent future occurrences.
The Patel family, one of many Indian migrants who make the trip to Canada only to cross the border to the U.S. With illegal immigration an ongoing issue for both countries, lawyers hope this trial will have a ripple effect in Canada by having Canadian Border Services focus less on deportation and focus more on punishing smugglers.
They go after the students and the workers and the people who get here, and then they hit them for misrepresentation, and they deport them. But the people behind the whole schemes are the ones who seem to be getting away with it.
Raising concern, human smugglers won't stop until a clear message is sent.
History shows that smugglers, no matter how hard you punish them, simply find other employees to do their evil task.
Both men have pleaded not guilty, with the trial scheduled to take roughly 5 days at a federal courthouse in central Minnesota. Heather.
Kamal Karmali in Toronto. To another looming labor dispute in this country, thousands of CN rail workers will hold strike votes starting tomorrow. The union, representing some 3,500 railway workers, is calling on CN to address key issues, including job security, compensation, and working conditions. The union adds a strike vote will help it see where workers stand when it comes to the ongoing talks. There is a new tool to help travelers retrieve lost bags. Air Canada will soon partner with passengers to use AirTag technology when their luggage goes missing. CTV's Paul Hollingsworth has more.
It's a nightmare for travelers, losing your luggage at the airport.
They told me that it's in Toronto, it's coming later today.
Until then, this U.S. visitor will hang around and wait for an update.
As long as it all comes, we'll be good.
The retrieval process for lost bags could soon be much smoother. Apple has announced a new feature that will help users locate their bags with AirTags. Travelers attach the tech to their luggage and share the location of an AirTag with Air Canada.
If they do lose your luggage and they do find it somewhere where it wasn't supposed to be, do they have the processes in place to get it to you as quickly as possible?
In an email to CTV News, an Air Canada spokesperson said it will allow customers to securely share the location of their baggage containing AirTags directly with our baggage service team. This Air Canada flyer calls it a welcome and user-friendly option.
It's another tool so people can help them out, for that matter. Say, yeah, it's in the terminal. Here it is, according to my iPad.
This new AirTag feature will be available in most regions worldwide, allowing people to track their bags regardless of where they travel.
I think consumers should see it as a positive step, even though they have to put in their own costs to purchase those Apple trackers. But again, it's just one extra feature that can make you feel a lot better if you're traveling, especially if you're traveling with valuables in your checked luggage.
So far, Air Canada is the only Canadian airline that will use the AirTag luggage tracking system, which could be in place by the end of the year. Paul Hollingsworth, CTV News, Halifax.
Coming up, crowning a CFL champion. The fan frenzy in Vancouver. Plus, the friendly phone calls to strangers proving popular with listeners. The Winnipeg Blue Bombers were the heavy favorites heading into today's Grey Cup game in Vancouver, but the Toronto Argonauts had other ideas.
For the second time in 3 years, Toronto is the Grey Cup champion.
The Argos scored 24 points in the fourth quarter to surprise the Bombers 41-24 and win the 111th Grey Cup at BC Place in Vancouver. It's the Argos' 19th title and second in 3 years. This marks Winnipeg's third consecutive loss in the championship game. And Prince Harry made a surprise appearance at the game. The Royal took to the field before kickoff with the BC Lions owner and a Canadian Invictus Games athlete promoting the next major sports event to hit Vancouver this February. He swapped his gold Invictus Games jersey for a Grey Cup 2024 jersey. Witnessing that moment and the championship game, thousands of CFL fans from across the country flocked to Vancouver for the Grey Cup. The celebration expected to generate tens of millions of dollars in economic activity. CTV's Ben Milliger met up with fans ahead of kickoff.
Some Canadian football fans make an annual pilgrimage to the site of the Grey Cup, even if their team doesn't make it. The game itself here at BC Place, obviously the marquee event, but it's the other fan festival events that keep people coming back year after year. Estimates put the economic spin-off for Vancouver businesses in the neighborhood of $125 million as fans fill hotels and spread their cash around at bars and restaurants. Throughout downtown, people have been sporting jerseys from every team in the league, many reconnecting with rival fans they met at previous Grey Cups. Festival organizers hosted a variety of family-friendly activities throughout the week, along with an all-Canadian concert lineup each night at the Vancouver Convention Centre.
We got here Thursday night and we went to the Grey Cup Festival, the street party, zip line, all the stuff.
I think it's been excellent. I was here the last time BC held the Grey Cup and there wasn't this much enthusiasm as there is now in seeing the festivals downtown here and everything. I think it's great.
Close to 50,000 fans purchased tickets for the game. Not quite a sellout, but still respectable considering the hometown BC Lions didn't make it. All in all, most fans seem to think this was another very successful Grey Cup weekend. Ben Milliger, CTV News, Vancouver.
Still ahead tonight, bike lanes spark backlash. The growing divide as municipalities mull over green transportation. When it comes to bike lanes, it seems cities often pedal right into a path of controversy. Canadians don't always want to share the road. CTV's Kathy Lee has more on the adjustments to traffic flow.
When a bike lane opens, the process isn't always a smooth ride.
What's not surprising is sort of the feeling or the fight about roadway space.
Many were worried about roadway space in Calgary after the city made a controversial bike network permanent in 2016. The sentiment echoed in Vancouver in 2009. Ridiculous! When the first permanent cycle lane opened on the Burrard Street Bridge.
What this is going to do is going to cause a lot of traffic jams.
Now, more than 1 million cyclists roll through without a gridlock. But despite the success, the country's largest city could see itself backpedal on existing bike lanes as the Ford government puts the wheels in motion to remove them from 3 main Toronto roads.
This is not okay. This is overstepping local democracy.
The city will be slower and have worse traffic overall.
But for the average person, their view of the impact of bike lanes differ. A Nanos research study reveals the majority of Canadians believe that bike lanes on the road worsen traffic and support spending tax dollars on building bicycle infrastructure, not on roadways.
It speaks to the challenge that people see with bike lanes. Yeah, there's a problem, but there's also a potential solution, at least that a majority of Canadians support.
People don't really know how bike lanes work because we have very few bike lanes in the country.
Often in the research what we find is that bike lanes help improve traffic flow.
Experts say the assumption is that opening up more vehicle lanes would reduce congestion, but a phenomenon called induced traffic results in the opposite effect. That's because when another lane is added, people perceive more opportunities to travel and may respond by driving more, which can lead to more traffic congestion. Kathy Lee, CTV News, Calgary.
To a chaotic scene now when a small plane crashed into the parking lot of a racetrack in Southern California. The single-engine plane went down near the drag strip east of Los Angeles, hitting at least 2 parked vehicles on the ground. 4 people were on board the plane. 3 were hospitalized, 2 with critical injuries. Nobody on the ground was hurt. Races were paused as emergency crews responded, but the event later resumed. The FAA is investigating. A gold pocket watch given to a ship captain who helped rescue Titanic survivors has sold for a record-breaking $2 million. The 18-carat Tiffany timepiece was gifted by 3 women who survived the shipwreck as thanks to a captain who diverted his passenger ship to help save them. The watch was sold to a private U.S. collector and is the most ever paid for a piece of Titanic memorabilia. After the break, East Coast talks. The joy of making random connections over a call with strangers. We leave you tonight with some cute and at times confusing conversations. A media host in Toronto is picking up the phone and calling people on the East Coast. The chats with strangers leading to a successful series. Here's CTV's Heather Wright.
Hello?
Hey, you, how are ya?
Not too bad, and you?
They are perhaps the nicest prank calls. And what's for dinner tonight?
Oh, I don't know. Codfish.
Jax Irwin, a radio and podcast host, dials random Nova Scotia numbers to see how long the person on the other end of the line will chat.
Well, I wanted to check in. I heard you guys are getting buckets of rain.
I couldn't believe it.
The idea started during a trip back home to Dartmouth, Nova Scotia this summer. Irwin now lives in Toronto, but she was feeling nostalgic for the East Coast.
So I was like, why not call the White Pages? It kind of just spiraled.
Millions of people have now watched videos of the calls.
Did you get fries?
Irwin's East Coast accent quickly charming the stranger who happened to pick up.
I think that through the pandemic, especially, there was such a loss of connection in so many ways. And sometimes it's nice just to chat about how the weather is, what's for dinner, and how you're doing.
Irwin says if she senses any hesitation or confusion in someone's voice, she will say wrong number and hang up.
Usually they just keep talking because they don't want to admit they don't know who they're talking to.
So the question we had, are people in Ontario as nice and friendly as those down east?
Okay, so we're going to test out a theory.
After a few tries, we reached Rodney.
How you doing?
Not too bad.
What's going on today?
Not very much.
Good, good.
Irwin says she enjoys these calls and connection it gives her to friendly strangers.
In a world that sometimes feels a bit dark and isolating, it's nice just to talk to people.
So if a blocked number calls you, you might want to answer.
Is it starting to pour there, or how's the weather?
No, weather's okay here right now. It's clouded over, but
you never know who might be on the other end of the line. Heather Wright, CTV News, Toronto.
Just have to pick up the next time the phone rings. That is our newscast for this Sunday evening. I'm Heather Butts. For all of us at CTV National News, thank you for watching. Sandy and Omar will be here with you tomorrow. I'll see you again on Friday. Good night.